international groups that list corruption. Russia has fallen, so it's gotten worse. So what Medvedev is saying, I'm going to try to clean it up because you, Putin, didn't do it. That may be one way of kind of establishing his independence from Putin instead of being this protege. But in answer to your question, the rest of the economy is not in good shape. Agriculture, strangely enough, is picking up a little bit. I mean, Wayne used to sell them chickens and other things. And now what is happening, the Russians have kind of given up being self-sufficient and producing their own feedstock. So what they're doing is they're buying, more meat from the West. They're just trying to not try to grow feed grains because it's too far north to do that, even when there was not the corruption, even when you didn't have the collective farm system. So they're beginning to export actually some wheat now, which they didn't do before. But small business is a problem. If you have a chance to go to Russia, you'll see a lot of these street merchants in kiosks. And one of the things I always do is ask them, how much do you have to pay the police to be here? And you can get a rate. And the rate goes up each year, of course, because of inflation. But they won't tell you at first, but because they don't know what you're doing. But you can usually find out, and it is not healthy. It's just not a healthy system.
There is a growing sentiment in Russia, though, as you know, in the Senate and some of the other government agencies to prevent imports of food. It's what we have to raise it in these meetings. You raised it, Marshall, and Peter's going to die. But chicken diplomacy is really active right now, this week. There are many, many meetings going on because some parts of the Russian business community and government are trying to, once again, raise a certain kind of protective issues there because ultimately they would like to be self-sufficient in agriculture. We have to say historically, we know, and it's in your book, from 1895 to the beginning of the First World War. I mean, this was the grain basket, bread basket of Europe. They had major exports, and some people say in the United Nations and other places that actually Russia could be a potential source for the world food supply situation. So
particularly in the day when food prices are going up.
When the food prices and the oil prices are so high. Yes. We've got about a few minutes, 6 or 7 minutes or something.
Dr. Goldman, thank you for coming to the Southern Center. It's a delight to have you. As in the words of our president, I look into your eyes and see your soul. I want to know when you look into the crystal ball, what do you see in 10 or 20 years in Russia? How is it playing with the United States? How is it playing with its neighbors? Has it cut off gas to Eastern Europe? What's the future hold?
Yeah. Well, I should tell you, somebody asked before about my wife, or China. And one of the things we do, we give this shoe and dance performance where we look at where do we see China 10 years from now, where do we see Russia, where do we see the United States. And I make a diagram, and if you plot, the economist coming out in me, if you plot capabilities with aspirations, the best way to say is Japan has aspirations that are rather limited at this point, but it's a lot of capabilities. China, early on, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, had a lot of aspirations, but didn't have much in the way of capabilities. But if you project it, where it is today, where it's been, where it's going to be, you got to say, watch out, because it's going up in that direction. And Russia collapsed 10 years ago. It was at the bottom. Its abilities, it didn't have the capabilities at all. Now Putin has come back. We want to be a great superpower again. Superpower certainly in terms of energy, maybe down the road, but military as well. But sooner or later, with this wealth, unless they can not solve their population problem, they're going to address this too. But where are we in the United States? That's the thing that scares me most of all, because we've been bankrupting ourselves. If you look, one of the ways I look at this is what of our trade deficit. The Russians are having a trade surplus each year of $120 billion. I don't mean to be a mercantilist, But, you know, with a trade deficit of about $750 billion a year, oil imports about $400 billion a year, where we're dependent on other countries, our deficit, you know, and you look to see where the country is going, it's scary. It is scary. But let me, maybe this is something that I should tell you about. This business, I looked into his eyes and got a sense of his soul. Because I mentioned before, this odd couple, the oddest couple I've ever seen in my life, the two of them. I've not seen them together physically, but I've watched them on television. Their body language is really strange. And I said that Putin, 4 times now, I've heard him bring up Bush in the most complimentary way. And so where did it come from? Well, if you go back to the year 2000, the election in the United States, Bush and Condoleezza Rice said, you know, to discredit Gore, who headed a joint commission with Cherno Mirdin, the guy here who had his own problems. They said, well, we're not going to have any more summit meetings, bilateral meetings. We gave too much away. They didn't really pressure Cherno Mirdin in the way they should have. So when we take over, we won't have that. And they continued that after the election in 2001, and it continued.